Welcome back to PSC Tech Bytes. Today we start a new series of episodes about what's new in SharePoint Framework 1.16, which Microsoft released mid-November 2022. For example, with this new release of SharePoint Framework, we now have the capability under preview to host SharePoint Framework Teams tabs inside Office.com or Outlook.com. We have support for the Teams JavaScript SDK version 2, as well as for React 17 and for Node.js version 16. We also have support for Microsoft Graph version 3, as well as the capability to render adaptive card extensions in Microsoft Viva Connection asynchronously, as well as many more small features and capabilities introduced with this new version of SharePoint Framework. So today let's start talking about the new support for the Teams JavaScript SDK version 2, and then in the upcoming episode we will dig into some other functionalities introduced with SharePoint Framework 1.16. So here we have a SharePoint Framework 1.16 solution that I have already created. As you can notice here, the version of SharePoint Framework is 1.16.0, and I created a web part, and inside this web part I'm using partially the auto-generated code, auto-generated by the scaffolding tool. So for example, here in the getEnvironmentMessage auto-generated method, we can rely on the this.context.sdk as we used to do, and .microsoft.teams.teams.js. And this will go through the .app get context, which will give us back a context of the app in which the Teams extension is running right now, based on the Teams JavaScript SDK version 2. Now, by evaluating the context.app.host.name, we can define if the application is running in Office Portal, in the Outlook Web Access, or in Teams, or if not, in the default environment, which means that we don't have a Microsoft Teams object in the SDK, and as such, we are running inside SharePoint Online only. What is interesting to notice is that here I slightly modified this method to get a reference to the context that I get whenever I'm running in the Microsoft Teams context. And I store this information inside a property of my web part. This property _app_context is a property of type app.context, which I can find inside the @Microsoft/TeamJS v2 namespace package. So here I have the app type defined, and I can get a variable which will hold the Microsoft Teams context, which I will provide to the React component, which will do the actual rendering of my UI element. And inside of that one, I get the app context. And as you can see right now, the new and extended app context give us a bunch of properties grouped by inner context. So for example, if you think about what we had with previous version of SharePoint Framework and with previous version of Teams SDK, we just had all of the properties listed inside the context object. Now we have properties for the app, for the channel, for the chat, for the meeting, and so on and so forth. So all of the properties are grouped by context, and we can go through all of them, or at least some of them, the most interesting ones, just by playing with the app context dot the target group. So the channel could be the chat, could be the team, and as you can see we have a bunch of properties like the display name, the relative URL, the membership type, the ID of the channel in which we are, or the ID of the chat, the ID of the group where the team tab is running. We have information about the app hosting our solution. We have information about the user, or again about the team. You can see we have the team ID, the team display name. We also have the URL of the SharePoint site backing the team in which we are. And we have information about the user, like the user principal name, the user ID, and if we are hosted in a meeting, the meeting ID, and many more properties. So this is a sample solution where I'm using the app context provided as a property of my React component. And here you can see in the UI my Teams tab built with SharePoint Framework running inside Teams. And here you can see all of the properties that I have in this specific context with their value. And you can clearly see that this becomes really useful whenever you want to use, for example, Microsoft Graph to get information about the team in which you are, because you will get the ID of the team, you will get the ID of the channel, and so on and so forth. So really useful and powerful. And generally speaking, you can play with the Teams JavaScript SDK version 2 from within the SharePoint Framework solution hosted in Teams. Like always, thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it interesting, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you next week. And remember, subscribe to this channel. Thank you.